two women took their best friend to Cedar Ridge Mountain to pray for her wedding. Before the sun set, they were certain she was dead. 2 years later, the woman they left for dead walked back into Westbrook, alive. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you enjoy emotional, true storytelling with unforgettable endings. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next documentary. What happened next exposed a betrayal so shocking that an entire
Welcome
town
to Evelyn
struggled
Johnson Home
to
Decor.
believe it. This is the unbelievable story of Evelyn Johnson, whose kindness made her loved by everyone, except the two women she trusted most. It's a story of friendship, poisoned by jealousy, a wedding that never happened, a family that refused to give up hope, and a miracle that no one saw coming. Because sometimes, the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people sitting closest to you, smiling at you, praying with you, while secretly waiting for your downfall. Now the real story begins.
Westbrook was the kind of town where people still remembered your name, where neighbors greeted one another across front lawns, and where kindness spread faster than gossip. Among the thousands of people who called the town home, one name was spoken with genuine admiration almost everywhere you went. Evelyn Johnson wasn't famous because she appeared on television or because she inherited wealth. She became known because she quietly changed people's lives without expecting anything in return. At just 29 years old, she had built one of the most successful home decor companies in the region, supplying luxury homes, hotels, and businesses across the state. Her success brought financial freedom, but it never changed the values her parents, Robert and Margaret Johnson, had spent a lifetime teaching her. Every Friday, she delivered groceries to struggling families without cameras following her. Every Christmas, she secretly paid utility bills for households facing hardship. Every September, she covered school fees for children whose parents could no longer afford an education. She never announced her generosity. She simply believed that every blessing became more meaningful when it was shared. If you asked people across Westbrook who Evelyn Johnson was, very few mentioned her business first. Instead, they remembered the woman who helped them when no one else did. To Robert and Margaret, however, Evelyn wasn't the successful entrepreneur admired by the town. She was still the little girl who laughed too loudly during family dinners, insisted on washing dishes beside her mother every Sunday evening, and never missed a chance to tease her father whenever his favorite football team lost another game. Their home on Maplewood Drive remained the one place where Evelyn left business behind and simply became their daughter again. Margaret often smiled as she watched Evelyn give away money almost as quickly as she earned it. More than once, she gently warned her, "My dear, remember to save something for yourself." Evelyn would always laugh, wrap her arms around her mother, and answer the same way. "Mom, everything I have came from God. If I can make somebody else's life a little easier, then I've already received more than enough." Robert admired those words, but deep inside, Margaret sometimes felt an uneasiness she couldn't explain. Perhaps it was simply a mother's instinct. She quietly prayed that the world would always be as kind to her daughter as her daughter had been to everyone else. She had no way of knowing that danger wasn't coming from strangers. It was already sitting at Evelyn's table, smiling beside her and calling itself friendship. If someone had met Kiki Reynolds and Tamara Scott during those years, they would have believed they had found two loyal friends. The three women were almost inseparable. They had met in college nearly a decade earlier, survived difficult exams together, celebrated birthdays together, traveled together, and supported one another through the challenges of adulthood. People around Westbrook often joked that they looked more like sisters than friends. Whenever Evelyn organized a charity event, Kiki and Tamara were there, smiling beside her. Whenever Evelyn celebrated another business achievement, they were among the first to congratulate her. On social media, they posted photographs filled with laughter and affectionate captions that convinced everyone their friendship was unbreakable. Even Robert and Margaret Johnson welcomed them into their home like family. They celebrated Thanksgiving together, attended church together, and shared countless Sunday dinners around the Johnson family's dining table. From the outside, there was nothing unusual about their relationship. It looked like the kind of lifelong friendship most people spend their entire lives searching for. What no one could see was that the friendship had slowly begun changing years earlier. The change wasn't sudden. It happened quietly, almost invisibly, one comparison at a time. Every new business contract Evelyn signed became another reminder of what Kiki believed she deserved. Every compliment Evelyn received quietly wounded Tamara's pride. Whenever people praised Evelyn's generosity, Kiki smiled politely while silently wondering why no one ever admired her the same way. Whenever Evelyn spoke excitedly about another opportunity, Tamara applauded with everyone else, but later that night she complained bitterly over the phone. "Why does everything always work out for her?" she once asked. Kiki didn't answer immediately because deep down she had been asking herself the same question for years. They convinced themselves that life had somehow been unfair, that Evelyn had been given opportunities they never received, and that somehow her success had become the reason for their own disappointments. Instead of working to improve their own lives, they slowly became experts at measuring them against hers. Comparison quietly became resentment, and resentment slowly became something much harder to recognize. Ironically, the person who never noticed any of it was Evelyn herself. She trusted them completely. When Kiki struggled to pay rent after losing a major client, Evelyn transferred the money without asking when she would be paid back. When Tamara's car broke down, Evelyn quietly covered the repair bill because she didn't want her friend to lose her job. More than once, she loaned them money that was never returned, yet she never mentioned it again because she believed genuine friendship wasn't measured by keeping score. Margaret occasionally noticed another large transfer leaving Evelyn's bank account and gently questioned her. "Was that for Kiki again?" she would ask. Evelyn simply smiled. "She's having a difficult month," Margaret sighed, forcing herself to remain silent. But the uneasy feeling in her heart never completely disappeared. One evening, she quietly looked at her daughter and said, "Not everyone who smiles at you is celebrating your happiness." Evelyn laughed softly before embracing her mother. "Mom, Kiki, and Tamara would never hurt me. They're my family." Margaret smiled because she didn't want to argue. But after Evelyn left that evening, she knelt beside her bed and whispered a simple prayer. "Lord, protect my daughter from the dangers she cannot see." Around that same time, another person quietly entered Evelyn's life. His name was Daniel Brooks, and unlike many people who admired Evelyn's success, Daniel hardly noticed the expensive dresses, the growing business, or the attention she received from everyone around her. Their paths first crossed during a charity fundraising gala in downtown Westbrook. The ballroom was filled with influential business leaders, local politicians, and photographers eager to capture every generous donation made that evening. While most guests remained focused on networking, Daniel noticed something almost no one else did. An elderly woman standing near the entrance suddenly became overwhelmed by the large crowd. Without hesitation, Evelyn stepped away from an important conversation, guided the woman to a quiet chair, brought her a glass of water, and stayed with her until she felt comfortable again. She didn't know anyone was watching. Daniel did. That small act of kindness revealed more about her character than any speech she could have delivered that night. After the event ended, Daniel introduced himself. He wasn't searching for clever pickup lines or trying to impress her with expensive watches or business titles. Instead, he asked a simple question that immediately caught Evelyn's attention. "Can I ask you something?" She smiled politely. "Of course." Daniel looked back toward the now empty ballroom before speaking. "Why did you leave an important conversation just to help someone nobody else even noticed?" Evelyn thought for a moment before answering. "Because kindness shouldn't depend on whether anyone is watching." Daniel smiled. "I've been trying to figure out all evening whether people like you still exist." Evelyn laughed. What began as a brief conversation stretched into nearly 2 hours as they spoke about faith, family, purpose, and the kind of future they both hoped to build. Neither of them realized that night would quietly change the direction of their lives forever. Over the following year, friendship gradually became love. Daniel admired the woman Evelyn was when nobody expected anything from her. Evelyn admired Daniel because he never treated her like a successful businesswoman. He treated her like a partner. He celebrated her victories without competing with them. He challenged her to rest when she worked too hard, encouraged her dreams without trying to control them, and reminded her that success meant very little if it cost the people she loved. Their relationship grew steadily, built on honesty instead of appearances. Eventually, on a peaceful evening at Lakeside Park, Daniel knelt beneath the fading colors of the setting sun, held out a small velvet box, and asked the question that changed everything. With tears filling her eyes, Evelyn whispered the answer he had been praying to hear. Yes. The applause that followed echoed across the park as strangers celebrated the newly engaged couple. Robert and Margaret embraced one another with joyful tears. Friends rushed forward to congratulate them. Cameras captured smiling faces. It looked like the beginning of a beautiful future. But standing only a short distance away were two women whose smiles never reached their eyes. Kiki Reynolds clapped politely, while her heart quietly filled with bitterness. Beside her, Tamara Scott stared at the engagement ring sparkling on Evelyn's finger and felt something inside her finally break. She remembered meeting Daniel nearly 2 years earlier at a business conference, hoping he might notice her. He never called. He never pursued her. Then Evelyn entered his life, and within a year he was asking her to become his wife. In that moment, jealousy stopped being a passing emotion. It became an obsession. Neither woman said a word as they drove home that evening. They didn't need to. Sometimes the most dangerous decisions are made in complete silence. 48 hours before the wedding, that silence would become a plan. With the wedding only 2 days away, excitement filled every corner of the Johnson household. Margaret Johnson carefully pressed Evelyn's wedding gown one final time, smiling each time she imagined seeing her daughter walk down the aisle. Robert spent the afternoon reviewing the guest list, making small adjustments that probably didn't matter but somehow made him feel involved. Daniel Brooks called whenever he found an excuse, sometimes simply to hear Evelyn's voice for a few minutes before laughing about how difficult it was to wait another 48 hours. Everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. It felt like the beginning of the happiest chapter of Evelyn's life. That was exactly why she never questioned the phone call she received that Thursday morning. Kiki Reynolds sounded as cheerful as ever. She explained that she and Tamara Scott wanted to surprise her with one final outing before the wedding. They had chosen Cedar Ridge Mountain because it overlooked the entire valley, making it the perfect place to thank God for bringing Evelyn and Daniel together. Tamara joined the call moments later, insisting that every bride deserved a quiet moment of prayer before beginning married life. The idea touched Evelyn deeply. She thanked them repeatedly for thinking of her. Looking back years later, she would remember one heartbreaking detail. The women she trusted most didn't have to convince her to go. She accepted immediately because genuine friendship had never taught her to be suspicious. Late that afternoon, the three women drove towards Cedar Ridge Mountain beneath a sky painted with golden sunlight. They laughed during the journey, reminisced about college memories, stopped briefly to take photographs, and even recorded a short video joking about one last girls' trip before the wedding. Anyone watching those videos would have seen nothing but happiness. Nobody would have guessed they were witnessing the final moments of Evelyn's old life. As they reached the summit, the view stretched for miles in every direction. The cool breeze carried the scent of pine trees through the quiet mountain air. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment and smiled. "Look at this," she said softly. "God really creates beautiful places." The three women joined hands near the overlook. Evelyn began praying first. She thanked God for her parents, for Daniel, for her growing business, and for the friendships that had carried her through every season of life. Then, almost instinctively, she thanked him for Kiki Reynolds and Tamara Scott, calling them two of the greatest blessings she had ever received. Those words lingered in the silence long after she finished speaking. When Evelyn finally opened her eyes, something felt different. Kiki had quietly stepped away. Tamara stood behind her, gripping a heavy tree branch lying among the rocks. Before Evelyn could ask what was happening, Kiki picked up another branch. The warmth that had filled the afternoon disappeared instantly. Tamara was the first to speak, but her voice no longer sounded familiar. Years of bitterness poured out in a matter of seconds. She accused Evelyn of taking every opportunity life had to offer. She spoke about Daniel Brooks, admitting she had met him long before Evelyn ever did and had hoped he would choose her instead. Kiki added every frustration she had hidden behind forced smiles, complaining about Evelyn's business, her reputation, her generous parents, her financial success, and the admiration she received throughout Westbrook. Evelyn stood frozen. She searched their faces for some sign that this was a cruel joke. There wasn't one. The hatred before her was real, and it had been growing quietly for years. Realizing the danger she was in, Evelyn did the only thing she could think of. Through tears, she begged them to stop. She offered to cancel the wedding. She promised to leave Westbrook forever if it meant saving her life. She told Tamara she could have Daniel if that was truly what she wanted. None of it mattered. Jealousy had already drowned out reason. Without another word, Tamara swung the branch with all her strength. The impact sent Evelyn stumbling backward in shock. Before she could recover, Kiki struck her again. Dizzy and bleeding, Evelyn reached desperately for anything she could hold on to. But there was only empty space behind her. Her terrified scream echoed across Cedar Ridge Mountain as she disappeared over the edge of the ravine. Silence followed almost immediately. The two women rushed to the cliff and looked down. Far below, broken branches concealed the motionless figure lying among the rocks. Neither could see any movement. For several long moments, they simply stared. Then Tamara lowered the branch, still clutched in her hands, and whispered, "It's over." Kiki nodded without taking her eyes off the valley below. Together, they threw the blood-stained branches into the undergrowth, gathered their belongings, and walked calmly back toward the parking area. During the drive home, they rehearsed the same story again and again. If anyone asked, they hadn't seen Evelyn after leaving town. They would express concern. They would join the search. They would comfort her family. And if they repeated the lie often enough, eventually everyone would believe it. What neither woman knew was that the mountain had not remained completely silent. Hidden deep within the forest below, an old hunter named Samuel Reed had heard a scream unlike anything he had ever heard in those woods. That single sound would become the difference between a funeral and a miracle. As darkness settled over Cedar Ridge Mountain, Samuel Reed was making his way home after checking the hunting traps he had placed earlier that week. At 65 years old, he knew every trail, every stream, and every unusual sound the mountain could produce. That was why the scream stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't the cry of an injured animal. It wasn't the wind moving through the trees. It was the desperate scream of someone fighting for their life. Without hesitating, Samuel grabbed his lantern and began climbing down the steep hillside toward the sound. Loose rocks slid beneath his boots, thorny branches tore at his jacket, and several times he nearly lost his footing, but he refused to turn back. When his lantern finally illuminated the bottom of the ravine, his heart sank. Lying beneath broken branches was a young woman covered in blood. Her breathing was barely noticeable. Samuel dropped to his knees, searched desperately for a pulse, and after several terrifying seconds, found the faintest sign of life. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered. Carefully lifting Evelyn onto his shoulders, he began the exhausting journey back to Pine Creek Village, praying with every step that he wasn't already too late. While Samuel fought to save a stranger's life, another nightmare was unfolding in Westbrook. Saturday morning arrived, and guests slowly filled the church where Evelyn Johnson and Daniel Brooks were supposed to begin the rest of their lives together. White roses decorated the aisle. Soft music echoed through the sanctuary. Daniel waited at the altar, smiling every time the entrance doors opened. 30 minutes passed, then another 30. Evelyn wasn't answering her phone. Margaret Johnson tried calling again and again without success. Robert contacted friends, relatives, and coworkers, hoping someone had heard from her. Kiki Reynolds and Tamara Scott stood among the guests, pretending to share everyone's concern, repeating that perhaps Evelyn had been delayed by unexpected traffic. But as the hours slipped away, excitement gave way to fear. Before the wedding could officially be postponed, police officers arrived with questions no family ever wants to hear. When was the last time anyone saw Miss Evelyn Johnson? Within minutes, the celebration became a missing person investigation. Westbrook refused to give up without a fight. Missing person posters appeared across the city. Local television stations interrupted regular programming with Evelyn's photograph. Volunteers searched forests, rivers, abandoned buildings, and hiking trails surrounding Cedar Ridge Mountain. Helicopters circled overhead while search dogs followed every scent they could find. Daniel visited every place that held a memory of their relationship, hoping somehow she would appear. He searched their favorite cafe, Lakeside Park, her office, the charity center, and every road she normally traveled. Robert contacted hospitals across the state while Margaret visited church after church, kneeling before empty sanctuaries and praying the same simple prayer. "Please, Lord, bring my daughter home." But as weeks became months, leads disappeared, evidence faded beneath heavy rain, and search teams gradually grew smaller. The city slowly accepted the possibility no one wanted to believe. Evelyn Johnson was probably gone forever. Only Daniel refused to accept it. Every Friday evening, without fail, he returned to Cedar Ridge Mountain carrying the engagement ring Evelyn never had the chance to wear on her wedding day. Standing near the overlook where investigators believed she had last been seen, he whispered the same promise into the evening wind. "If you're alive, I'll find you. And if somehow you can't find your way back, I'll keep waiting anyway. Meanwhile, Margaret refused to pack away Evelyn's belongings. Her bedroom remained untouched. The wedding dress still hung exactly where she had left it. Some evenings, Margaret would prepare dinner and, without thinking, place a third plate on the table before suddenly remembering the chair would remain empty again. Other nights, she imagined hearing footsteps outside the front door. Hope would race through her heart as she hurried into the hallway, only to find silence waiting on the other side. She never admitted it to Robert, but every night before going to sleep, she hugged one of Evelyn's sweaters and prayed she would smell her daughter's perfume just one more time. Hope had become painful, but letting go felt impossible. Hundreds of miles away, however, the woman they mourned was still alive. Evelyn remained unconscious inside Samuel Reed's modest cabin in Pine Creek Village. The village healer managed to stabilize her injuries, but the severe blow to her head left everyone uncertain whether she would ever wake again. Samuel never missed a morning. Before sunrise, he changed her bandages, prepared fresh herbal medicine, and prayed quietly beside her bed. The villagers soon joined him, bringing food, blankets, and anything they could spare. No one knew the stranger's name, but they treated her as though she had always belonged among them. Then, 6 months after the night she fell from Cedar Ridge Mountain, Evelyn finally opened her eyes. Relief quickly gave way to heartbreak when Samuel asked the simplest question imaginable. "My child, what is your name?" She searched desperately for an answer that refused to come. Tears filled her eyes as she shook her head. She couldn't remember her name. She couldn't remember her parents. She couldn't remember Daniel Brooks. She couldn't even remember why she had been lying at the bottom of a mountain. The doctors explained that the injury had caused severe memory loss. Her memories might return in weeks, years, or perhaps never. Samuel looked into the frightened eyes of the young woman he had rescued and quietly made another promise to himself. Until her family found her, she would never face the future alone. Months turned into 2 quiet years. Although Evelyn couldn't remember the life she had lost, she slowly built a new one in Pine Creek Village. She taught children to read, helped elderly neighbors with daily chores, worked alongside Ethan Miller in the fields, and quickly became loved by everyone she met. Her memories had disappeared, but her kindness remained untouched. Samuel often smiled as he watched her helping others. "Whatever kind of woman you were before," he would quietly say, "your heart never forgot." Then, on what seemed like an ordinary afternoon, everything changed. While village children played outside Samuel's cabin, one of them accidentally struck Evelyn on the side of her head with a wooden stick. The impact was minor, but within seconds, she collapsed. As Samuel rushed to her side, thousands of forgotten memories came crashing back all at once. Daniel's proposal, her parents, her business, Cedar Ridge Mountain, Kiki Reynolds, Tamara Scott, the branches, the fall. Her eyes flew open as she gasped for air. Through uncontrollable tears, she looked at Samuel and spoke the words he had waited 2 years to hear. "My name is Evelyn Johnson, and I have to go home." Evelyn barely slept on her first night back in Westbrook. Every time she closed her eyes, the memories returned with painful clarity. She saw the narrow trail winding through Cedar Ridge Mountain. She heard Kiki Reynolds laughing during the drive, remembered Tamara Scott squeezing her hand while they prayed, and then saw the hatred that replaced every smile. For 2 years, those memories had been buried beneath silence. Now they were impossible to escape. But fear no longer controlled her. She had survived what was meant to end her life. The people who had stolen 2 years from her would finally have to face the truth. The following morning, Detective Michael Harrison arrived at the Johnson family's apartment carrying the original investigation file. It was worn from countless hours spent searching for answers that had never come. He placed it carefully on the dining table before looking directly at Evelyn. "When you're ready," he said quietly, "start from the beginning." The room fell silent. Robert wrapped an arm around Margaret while Daniel reached across the table and gently held Evelyn's hand. Taking a slow breath, she began describing everything exactly as she remembered it. She spoke about the phone call inviting her to Cedar Ridge Mountain, the laughter during the drive, the prayer they shared overlooking the valley, and the moment everything changed. Her voice trembled only once, when she described looking into the faces of the 2 women she had trusted like sisters and realizing they had never come to pray. They had come to make sure she never returned. Detective Harrison listened without interrupting. Every detail matched pieces of evidence that had never made sense during the original investigation. When Evelyn finished, he closed the file and nodded slowly. "This case never ended," he said. "It was waiting for you to come home." Within hours, he assembled his team. Rather than arrest Kiki Reynolds and Tamara Scott immediately, he wanted something stronger than suspicion. He wanted the truth to come from their own mouths. If they truly believed Evelyn was dead, then seeing her alive would do what 2 years of questioning never could. It would destroy the lie they had been living. That afternoon, Margaret Johnson made a phone call she never imagined she would make. Her voice sounded warm and familiar as Kiki answered. "Hello, sweetheart," Margaret said. "I've been feeling lonely lately. Would you and Tamara mind stopping by this afternoon? I'd really appreciate the company." Kiki accepted without hesitation. After all, for 2 years she and Tamara had carefully maintained the image of grieving friends. There was no reason to believe anything had changed. Less than an hour later, the two women arrived carrying flowers and wearing sympathetic smiles. They embraced Margaret, asked how she had been coping, and even claimed they still prayed for Evelyn every night. Hidden behind a closed bedroom door, Detective Harrison exchanged a quiet glance with his officers. Daniel clenched his jaw. Robert's hands tightened into fists. Evelyn stood, silently, listening to every word. The detectives first questioned the women separately. Kiki insisted she had spent the evening of Evelyn's disappearance at home. Tamara claimed she had attended an online prayer meeting. Minutes later, their stories began changing. One suddenly remembered stopping at a grocery store. The other insisted she had visited a friend. Detective Harrison remained calm. He quietly closed his notebook and looked toward the hallway. "There's someone I'd like you to meet," he said. The room fell completely silent. Slow footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. Kiki turned toward the doorway. Tamara followed. Then they saw her. Evelyn Johnson stepped into the room. The color drained from both women's faces. Kiki stumbled backward until she hit the wall behind her. Tamara's hands began trembling uncontrollably. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Their expressions revealed exactly what every detective in the room needed to know. Finally, Kiki whispered the words she immediately wished she could take back. You're dead." Detective Harrison leaned forward. "Interesting," he replied calmly. "How did you know she was supposed to be dead?" The room remained frozen. Evelyn looked directly into the eyes of the women she had once called sisters. "I trusted you," she said quietly. "I thank God for both of you while we were standing on that mountain." "Why?" Tamara collapsed into a chair and buried her face in her hands. 2 years of lies crumbled in seconds. Through uncontrollable sobs, she admitted everything. She confessed her jealousy, her obsession with Daniel Brooks, the years of resentment she had hidden behind fake smiles, and the attack on Cedar Ridge Mountain. Kiki soon followed, admitting they believed Evelyn had died after the fall and had spent the next 2 years pretending to search for her. Every word was recorded. Detective Harrison stood and nodded to the officers waiting nearby. "Kiki Reynolds and Tamara Scott, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Evelyn Johnson, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of a criminal investigation." The sound of handcuffs closing echoed through the apartment. Neither woman resisted. As they were escorted outside, reporters who had gathered after hearing rumors of new developments captured images that would appear on every front page in the state the following morning. The trial began several weeks later inside a packed Westbrook County courtroom. Every seat was occupied long before proceedings began. Residents who had joined the search 2 years earlier now sat beside journalists eager to report the extraordinary case. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered with quiet authority and reminded everyone that justice depended not on emotion, but on truth. One witness after another described the events that had unfolded. Samuel Reed told the jury about hearing a desperate scream and finding Evelyn beneath broken branches. Detective Harrison presented the recorded confessions. Medical experts explained how the severe head injury caused Evelyn's memory loss. Finally, Evelyn herself took the witness stand. There was no anger in her voice, only sadness. She described begging for mercy, offering to cancel her wedding and leave Westbrook forever if it meant sparing her life. She looked toward the jury and quietly said, "The hardest part wasn't the fall. It was realizing the people I loved wanted me gone." After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom became so quiet that every breath seemed audible. The foreperson stood and announced the verdict. "We find the defendants guilty on all counts. Judge Eleanor Whitmore looked toward Kiki and Tamara before delivering the sentence. "Jealousy is often dismissed as a private emotion," she said, "but when left unchecked, it becomes capable of destroying lives. You abused friendship, betrayed trust, and attempted to take the life of a woman who showed you nothing but kindness. This court sentences each of you to life imprisonment." The gavel struck the bench, bringing a chapter of unimaginable pain to an end. As officers prepared to lead them away, Kiki turned one final time toward Evelyn. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Tamara lowered her head in shame. The courtroom waited for Evelyn's response. She stood slowly before speaking with remarkable calm. "I forgive you," she said. "Not because you've earned it, and not because what you did no longer matters. I forgive you because I refuse to let your hatred become part of my future. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Those are yours to carry." Even Judge Whitmore paused for a moment, visibly moved by the strength of the woman standing before her. Several months later, spring returned to Westbrook. The same church that had once waited for a bride who never arrived was decorated once again with white roses and soft candlelight. This time, there were no unanswered phone calls, no worried whispers, and no empty aisle. Daniel Brooks stood at the altar with quiet confidence, his eyes fixed on the church doors. As they slowly opened, Robert Johnson walked proudly beside his daughter. Margaret smiled through tears that, for the first time in years, were tears of pure joy. Samuel Reed sat in the front row, honored not as a guest, but as family. When Evelyn reached the altar, Daniel gently took her hands and smiled. "I told you I'd wait," he whispered. Evelyn smiled back through tears. "And I promised I'd find my way home." Moments later, surrounded by the people who had never stopped believing, they exchanged their vows. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. Robert embraced Margaret. Samuel quietly wiped away a tear. Outside, the afternoon sun bathed Westbrook in warm light, as though the town itself had been given a second chance. As the celebration came to an end, Evelyn stepped outside and looked toward the distant outline of Cedar Ridge Mountain. 2 years earlier, she believed that mountain would become the place where her story ended. Instead, it became the place where her miracle began. She smiled, took Daniel's hand, and walked forward into the future she had almost lost. Sometimes the people who stand closest to us know our greatest strengths and our greatest vulnerabilities. That is why trust should never be given blindly, and why another person's success should never become the measure of our own happiness. Jealousy destroys far more than friendships. It destroys the heart that refuses to let it go. But as Evelyn Johnson's journey reminds us, darkness never has the final word. Truth has a way of returning. Hope has a way of surviving. And no matter how impossible life may seem, one act of courage, one answered prayer, or one person willing to help can change everything. Final closing. Some people will celebrate your success. Others will quietly resent it. The hardest part is that they often look exactly the same. Choose your friends wisely. Protect your peace. Celebrate the victories of others without comparing them to your own. Because jealousy doesn't just destroy relationships, it destroys the person who refuses to let it go. And remember this, no matter how dark your journey becomes, hope has a remarkable way of finding those who refuse to stop believing.